In honor of move-in day, RAs of Reddit, what's the worst parent-student separation you've seen? In a helicopter parenting situation, I had left my phone number at a desk for a desk attendant one night I was on duty. A resident saw this, my personal number, and gave it to his dad. Dad calls me and immediately starts yelling that there is a leak in his son's bathroom ceiling and pee has been leaking through it. Okay, how long? For a week. Has he done anything? Notified anyone? You're the RA. You're supposed to know. Dad chews me out for 10 more minutes. I check out the kid's room. He's got towels all over the bathroom floor. I look up at the ceiling. Super light leak. Definitely not pee. I tell him so and tell him to file a maintenance request. He demands that I do it for him. I point him in the right direction. But he's a big boy, so no. He demands to know if what I know is water is pee. I casually ask why he let what he thought was pee leak into his apartment for a week. As I go to leave, he tells me he's going to demand that the university pay for his ruined, wet, the function of towels and he wants my contact info to file a complaint. I nod, give him the info, and leave. His dad calls me a day later, but I had spoken to my boss the night before. Hi, I'm calling on behalf of, yes I know, sir, but I'm an RA and I handle students' problems. If he wants my attention, he can call me himself. Otherwise, I don't report to you. Have a nice day, sir. Delete my number. Mom thought she would be able to live with her daughter in the dorms. Upon being told that wasn't possible, she withdrew the daughter, and they both went back home. Been an RA for 3 years now. Every year, without fail, there's always that family that helps their kid move in on Sunday and then stays the entire freshman orientation week until school actually starts the next Monday. Except the freshmen obviously have activities to go to all throughout the week, so the parents, who can't accompany their kids to the activities, sit around either in the kids' room or in the lobby of the dorm. It drives me crazy. Last year was particularly bad, with an entire family of mom, dad, siblings, cousins, etc. all camped out in the dorm's lobby for a week. The university seemed to pick up on the fact that this is a problem, because this year they introduced a new event into orientation week, a goodbye lunch specifically for parents to give them the hint it is time to leave. Oddest story I had one room that had completely different roommates. Not like goth and yacht club odd couple sort of thing, but two different away from home experiences. One had been in a boarding school for years and was laid back. Second was a homeschooler with drill sergeant dad and doting mom. The laid back resident's parents didn't even show up. I asked him if he came alone and he said his parents were in town but wanted to avoid the chaos and would say goodbye tomorrow. Second resident almost seemed dazed when his parents left. His dad told him to stay in college, like an order, while mom cried and took forever to leave. Next day I check in on both. One was gone. The homeschooled one had moved out, drove a few hours and had arrived at his house 20 minutes after his parents did. A fellow student in the dorm was from the same town and even same church, which is how we found out. The parents of the remaining resident showed up the next day, asked where their son's room was at. I told them and they thanked me. Then asked if the freshmen had events planned or were they free for dinner because they wanted to take their son and his new roommate out for dinner. TLDR, one resident, sheltered his whole life, couldn't last 24 hours away from extreme parents. Bet daddy was disappointed. More funny than sad or bad, but this happened when I was moving into the dorms my freshman year. I am the second child in my family, so my parents had already gone through it once. My dad saw another father on move-in day who looked like he was on the verge of tears. My dad, trying to be friendly to the stranger, went up to talk to him. My dad, first kid going away to college, crying dad, number. It's just that I went to Michigan and my daughter going to Michigan State is really hard for me. When I was in RA in 2014 to 2015, one of my residents was 27-28 and was still having a hard time moving out of the house, but not because of her emotions. Her parents came over every night for dinner. They were over an hour away and kept on trying to get her to drop out and move back home. It became really hard for her. It got to the point where she asked me and the other RAs to tell her parents that she was out when they came to see her. They got mad since the first time we had to tell them that. She said she didn't know what she was going to do after the school year ended, but that she didn't want to move back home. She just wanted to be free from them. Yikes, poor girl. Hope she got out. Engineering school, 1970s. Mom dropped her kid off at his dorm and drives away. Yes, pushed his suitcase and a few boxes out of the car. Told Junior goodbye, study hard, and left. Junior was 15 freaking years old, super genius child prodigy with zero social skills. His roommates were horrified, but most of them had little brothers, so big brother parenting kicked in. The kid was pretty well socialized by the end of the first semester, and had a collection of de facto big brothers and big sisters helping him live life. It was a relief, because as a house counselor I was really worried I was going to have a bad situation on my hands. I did not need to do anything at all. Did buy the older guys beers a few times to thank them. That sounds like that movie Real Genius. Not an RA, but a friend's dorm had the worst case of parent-student separation I've ever seen. See, there wasn't any, at least if the mother had her way. The day after move-in, the girl's mother showed up in the middle of the day and asked for keys to the daughter's room. Yeah, no. Then she wanted someone to come with her upstairs and let her in. She was only there to get her daughter's dirty clothing. Why can't she do that? Still no. After 20 minutes of arguing, the woman left a note and told the poor guy at the front desk that it wasn't the last he'd heard from her. Insinuated he was some sort of pervert or rapist for covering the desk in a women's dorm, and said he'd be lucky if firing and being kicked out of school was all that happened to him. When the student was informed, she seemed totally embarrassed, apologized for her mother, and said it wouldn't happen again. 2 days later, the woman came back at 5:30 a.m. in the morning, shoulder surfed the passcode to the building, and then, when her child wouldn't answer calls from the lobby phone, snuck upstairs when one of the residents was leaving. Woke up the entire wrong floor of people by banging at the door to an empty room, and eventually got escorted out by my friend and public safety. But I just wanted to take my baby out to breakfast. How am I going to know she's eating right if I don't? I'm her mother, and I pay for everything. So you can't make me leave. I'm going to sue you. You're trying to keep me from my baby. Public safety kept someone in the lobby 24/7 for the next 3 weeks. It would have only been a few days, but scuttlebutt was that she tried twice more, including once in disguise, sunglasses, a baseball hat, and a set of university sweats. I feel bad for the kid. I had to tell a parent of an 18-year-old freshman that I'm not allowed to key you into her room to set up a surprise party, even if mom is paying for the dorm. It's a legal thing. Mom was soupy. She called her daughter, who then agreed we should have keyed them into her room cause mom is paying. Sorry, it's still not allowed. That roommate you have, talk to me privately. She is very pleased I didn't let strangers in while she was boning her boyfriend, and that's why we have rules. Accidental wingman. Wasn't an RA, but I worked in housing. I think the worst was the overprotective mother. She constantly called her son, who ended up not answering after the third call of the day. Mum would then call his RA, who would go to the student's room and tell him to call his mom. If he didn't do this, she called the RA again and had this repeat. It hit its climax when the mother couldn't get her son or the RA on the line and called the office in a fit of panic that her son had done drugs and died. No, he was just playing pool and ignored his phone. I think the director of housing stepped in at that point. We didn't hear anything after that. Kid's mom left him a $100 Subway gift card for food. He sold it to another freshman for $20 to buy alcohol from an older student. He then proceeded to spend the next 2 weeks begging food and money from people. In addition, any legal issues or housing violations we had, this kid just happened to be around for. Never really the perpetrator, but he always seemed to be there. Had a neighbor a couple doors down my freshman year that moved in and immediately started taking bong rips in his room in the middle of the day, with dozens of other freshmen and parents still milling around the floor doing move-in stuff. My roommate and I walked by and tried to tell him to keep it on the down low, but someone had already called the police. Dude got a possession paraphernalia charge and had to go down to the station, then attend an academic council. Barely scraped by but was able to stay in. I knew a guy like that. He got 2 strikes in the first semester and had to move to an off-campus apartment the second half of the year so he wouldn't get kicked out from all the drinking, drugs, and partying he did. I figured he ended up overdosing or in jail before graduation. Nope. I ran into him after I graduated. He became a pharmacist. I guess he always did know a lot about drugs. My RA time was the early 90s. The worst I saw was a guy who cried for 4 days after his mom dropped him off. It was the first time he had been away from home and had been extremely sheltered and couldn't handle being alone. It took a while, but his roommate was friendly and a genuinely nice guy and he helped him acclimate. The second wasn't necessarily separation issues but a fight between the father and the roommate. His son was heterosexual and he and his dad were both strict Christian and macho stereotypical jock types. He saw the posters that his roommate had up, mostly muscly men in speedos and musical posters. They both went ballistic and started harassing the poor kid. He stood up for himself and they jumped him. It took me, the other RA and 3 other guys from the floor to pull them off. We ended up kicking him out of the dorm and he was reprimanded by the university. This was over a decade ago. Mom and dad moved their daughter onto my floor. Most parents arrive and leave within 3-4 hours. This family were one of the first to arrive at 8:30 when the doors opened and spent the morning decorating. I was busy so I said hi and kept on trucking. They took their daughter out for lunch and got back at like 2 p.m. Very nice send off so far. At 4 p.m. they were still there. The room was decorated. The daughter and dad were just awkwardly sitting there not sure what to do, but the mom was fussing back and forth around the tiny dorm room. At 6 p.m. I was rounding up anyone who wasn't already down for dinner to make sure the introverts didn't just hide in their rooms on the first night. This family was still sitting in this room together. So, I said, "Hey, we're all going down for dinner. Ashley, would you like to join us?" Her mom answered, "Well, we're still sort of getting set up here." So, seeing what was happening I said, "Well, move-in hours expired an hour ago, and we're a little strict about visitors, as you can understand. Why don't you guys say your goodbyes, and Ashley can meet us downstairs?" The mom non-committally said, "Okay, we'll see," but I had like 10 other people with me so I couldn't wait around. I got back to my floor at 8 p.m. They were still there, almost 12 hours now. I was trying to be polite and compassionate for the mom, but I told them the parents would either need a visitor's pass for staying the night, if they wanted to stay any longer. The mom didn't say anything to me but confirmed she'd heard the message. About 20 minutes later the parents left. I talked to Ashley and she said her mom is really overbearing. I introduced her to some other girls who might run in the same cliques, and she settled in really well after that. This mom ended up being my freaking nightmare for the first 2 months of that semester. Not an RA, but on the move-in day of my first year of uni, one of my 5 flatmates called us all into the kitchen to demand we each let our 2 parents, 4 siblings and 4 grandparents sleep in our rooms for the next week. The kicker? None of them would be staying in her room because she needed her space. The other kicker? Her family lives half an hour away from campus. They didn't want to be too far from her in case something happened. This was the first time I had met her in person and obviously we all said no to her demands. I feel like you have more stories we need to hear. How are you going to ensure my daughter remains a virgin? I cannot do that, sir. That conversation will have to happen between you and her. I mean, the nice dad who came to me asking if I had seen the box of his daughter's handmade crafts and decorations was pretty sad. Someone must have picked it up accidentally, and I never saw it returned. This one is pretty wholesome, in the opposite direction of the worst. LOL. Mum was foreign, maybe Italian or Eastern European. Hugs her really tall son goodbye. You can tell it's a big deal to her. She leaves, and I watch him walk towards his dorm with the biggest smile on his face. Favorite moment from move-in day. A really tall son. Love this description. I also have large adult sons. Not an RA but involved in campus life and move-in. There's always several students who bring in all their stuff and bring it right back out 2 hours later because they weren't ready to leave. It honestly breaks my heart every time. I've seen one specific person do this 3 years in a row. I think she's living at home and taking community college classes now. We had one girl who lied to her family for months she had a dorm room. She even showed up with her family and her things, and when we didn't have a room for her she just broke down and sobbed. Like holy heck, she had her family drive 8 hours north for this. I don't know how she endured that car ride. Just yesterday I had some parents who wanted to set up a webcam in the hallway in front of their daughter's room so they could see when she got back and who was entering her room. Stage 400 stalkers. Not an RA, but helped with moving in every year I was at college. Free food, yay. Every year there would be at least one family who brought a U-Haul. Not just the trailer, but the full truck, full of stuff they can't live without. It was usually someone who was planning on pledging to a sorority and had boxes on boxes of costumes. More often than not they were moving into rooms where, after splitting the space with a roommate, they had less space that was in that truck. There was also the people who expected us to do everything for them. No, I don't know what room you're in and no, I'm not holding that full-size fridge up. Was in RA for 3 years. This really wasn't the worst, but the most sad I've seen. The girl's mom had died and it was really hard on the family. I came into her room to introduce myself and her dad were literally holding each other crying and praying for each other. And he left crying. I cried for hours when she told me why he was so sad to leave her. She had 2 little brothers she left at home too and she debated not going to college to stay and take care of them. It was heartbreaking. I had one parent asking me all sorts of questions about what the kid could get involved in and what he could do on campus. She was very worried he wasn't going to fit in. I tried to calm her down and soothe her worries. She was thankful and left me alone. The kid never even joined an activity. He didn't try. Then he would complain to me about not fitting in while playing video games in his room. I work in an accommodation department at a university. Colleagues told me we had a boy whose mother lived with him in a 6-bed hall with other students in the flat for 5 weeks before being forced to leave. Another time we had a dad who would come to campus twice a day every day to walk his daughter to class and back. I fear for those kids' futures. A mother and daughter were both attending the university and shared an apartment along with 2 other students. I always imagined it must be awkward for the other 2 to be living with a mother and daughter. When you helicopter so hard you enroll yourself in college as well. Poor freaking girl. Freshman girl on my floor was always, and I mean always, on the phone with her mother. Either she was just homesick, but no, every conversation would be about what to do with laundry, dirty dishes, talking to boys, etc. Apparently, her mom babied her all her life and never prepared her for life away from home. My friend had a roommate like this first year, Skyped her parents almost daily and laid out every single second of her day for them. Could not wrap my head around it. Mother discovered the residence hall had been the site of a double homicide-suicide in the early 2000s and sensed the presence of a ghost. Mother had a meltdown, almost withdrew a daughter from school, but then someone pulled out sage from somewhere and cleansed the hall. Mother happy, daughter embarrassed. All was well. Not an RA, but last week my friend and I decided to take a walk around campus, where we stopped to sit on a bench in front of the main statue. It was only us and a family. We didn't think much of it as the family was taking a selfie together. As soon as they finished, they hugged and began to say their goodbyes. As soon as the girl turned around and made it an appropriate distance, the mother and father began bawling. It's not the most unique story, but seeing it firsthand from a different perspective really tugs at the heart, remembering I was just in that student's shoes not too long ago. Walking away from my parents was tough, but it was definitely 100x harder for them. We also did this welcome assembly on the last day of orientation, wherein all the first years and families attend. During the end of the ceremony, all the first years leave early, leaving only the families in the gym. Basically, when all the first years leave, the whole gym erupts in tears because they give a bittersweet speech about how it's not goodbye, it's to be continued, and how it marks the end of orientation and time for the parents to say goodbye. RA in 2005. Had a Muslim kid from a Muslim country move in. Dad requests a private meeting with me, offers me $1,000 a month to befriend his kid, get him other friends, and make sure no one picks on him. I tell him absolutely not, and that's not how things work here. What the frick was I thinking, rejecting that sort of money? I'll never know. I'm not even a guy ruled by many convictions. I would take that in a heartbeat, tbh. Seems like it could be fun. Not an RA, but I had a friend who brought a huge amount of stuff with her, and that wasn't all. Every time I went over to say hi or ran into her or just went past her dorm, it turned out her dad has left to go get something else. And I mean she brought normal move-in stuff, sheets, a comforter, her laptop, sketchbooks, but she also brought like 60 shirts. For a quarter that was 10 weeks in length, a large storage shelf thing that went over her bed, and over the toilet shelf thing, several other pieces of furniture, so many bins. It's like she was moving into an apartment and not a freshman dorm room. I'm not sure when her parents eventually left, but she went up to visit them nearly every weekend, for the entire 4 years. For our first year, my mom lived locally and I didn't even visit her that often, even though it was only like a 30-minute drive versus my friend's 6-hour drive. I still get really baffled thinking of all that stuff she brought with her and kept every year, and she'd always comment on how big my room was when she visited. I couldn't point out it's because my room just had the school provided furniture and a mini fridge instead of like 5 extra pieces of furniture. Also, nobody would believe me when I'd say it just looks bigger because I put my bed lengthwise against one of the walls instead of having both beds with their short sides on the wall, jutting into the middle of the floor. Anyway, besides that, I don't remember there being too much parent-student separation drama. It was mostly pretty normal deals with parents helping carry in suitcases, going out to lunch, and then leaving. And everybody I saw always had normal amounts of stuff that wouldn't take up 3/4 of the dorm room on its own. I forgot to get a parking code that we didn't eventually need, so my mother told me I was going to develop an eating disorder, have a mental breakdown, and drop out, just like my friend 2 years older than me. In the end she wasn't far off, but it didn't help matters. No offense to you, but your mom sounds like an awful C. Hope life is better for you now. Mom backed over son with SUV because he bent down to pick up box after shutting lift gate and she didn't want to get stuck in rush hour traffic, so wasn't paying good attention, hurrying to back out of parking. He ended up with a mild concussion and road rash. She was a huge B about the whole thing. Felt bad for the guy. He had to go home every weekend to do family religious crap like house blessings and other random seeming stuff. He was Hindi but first generation American and just wanted to do college stuff on the weekend like drink and try and lose his virginity with a white girl. Holy crap, she hit her son with the car. Also, Hindi is a language. Hindu describes a person who follows the religion. Sorry to sound like an but I happen to be a first gen Indian American as well and it bothered me a little, lol. This isn't a move-in story, sorry, but a story of a bad resident. It was my last year as an RA and I had a kid that waited a few years before college, so he was like 20ish but taking freshman classes. This kid used racial and homophobic slurs occasionally to his friends. Okay, not appropriate, but I'm not a babysitter. I tell him, hey, you can't say that stuff, someone's going to get mad and it's against policy anyways. I didn't report it the first few times. Then he started to call our shy Japanese kids on the floor Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Like when they'd walk by the lounge on the way to the bathroom, hey Nagasaki, what's up? I told him, hey, you can't do that, man. Super disrespectful. Maybe I should report it? Nah, if he stops then I guess the problem's solved. Finally, he started putting fruit on the overweight kid's door. The insinuation that he should eat healthier, as a joke. Alright, this all needs to be reported. It's policy to tell people to knock it off once or twice, but this was enough to fill our an incident report on. Meetings and forms later, they call him in to talk about the stuff. He says I'm always picking on him and that I just hate him. Also, he said my GF stays over and that's against the rules, so if I can break the rules then he can too. It was like interacting with a 12-year-old. Nothing came of anything, but he did straighten up while he was in the dorm. Probably the least mature guy I had in a dorm in 4 years. Being an RA was awesome though. I loved living on campus. This episode has been titled 4chan Goes to College. I had a pretty embarrassing thing happen with my mom in college. I'm an only child, so my mom has always been a bit overprotective, and it probably didn't help that she and my dad got divorced the year before. So this separation was probably hard for her. Anyway, my friends asked me if I wanted to come with them to the Target that was like 30 minutes away. I said sure, but I ended up forgetting my phone in my room. We go to Target and then grab a bite to eat on the eat back, so the whole trip took probably like 2 or 3 hours. I get back to my Tuk AMD, check my phone and see I have like 30 missed calls and a bunch of voicemails from my mom. I call her back and she tells me that she's at the college waiting in parking lot. Apparently she was worried that I wasn't answering my phone in the middle of the day and thought something bad had happened, so she drove the hour and a half up to make sure everything was okay. I'm late to the party, but last year I had to teach an 18-year-old student what a mailbox was and how to use it. His parents were fussing over the distance to college because they felt he might get lost in large dangerous London. Usually I would roll my eyes, but their 18-year-old had no concept of what a mailbox was. He wanted to know how he would know which letter was for him in the communal box. I would be concerned about him alone in London too. I wanted to hand him back to them and send him home. After his first inscription, someone had to teach him how to clean down to the basics of this is a washcloth. How does a parent let their kid become so useless at living? First year of uni is an eye-opener of just how underprepared in life some people are. Not college, but I was a sleepaway counselor, so I've seen my share of shrieking children and parents. One camper of mine had been great for the 3 weeks we had her. No homesickness. Totally chill. Then her parents came for visiting day. We had to pry her off the bunk door as she screamed and cried that afternoon when her parents had to go. 15 minutes later, fine. The peeling from door ordeal was at least 20-30 minutes, but she just reverted back to being chill. It was bizarre. I sail with kids and we advise the parents not to visit during the trip for that very reason. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.